12. Gabriel Pals. After receiving a phone call in May of 2023 from her son's school about an alleged assault by a teacher, a mother from Toledo, Ohio was left feeling unsure of whether she could trust the people who were responsible for her child's safety during the day. Marcela Graciana told local station WTVG that she was at work when she was informed that 29-year-old Gabriel Pals was accused of throwing her son across the classroom. According to her understanding of the events, the teacher told the boy to sit down. He sat on the desk, at which point Pals allegedly grabbed him by the shoulders and threw him, causing the student to hit his head and face on the floor and leaving him with a small gash above his eye. Court documents state that other students had to be removed from the classroom while staff members cleaned up blood. Graciana was especially troubled by the fact that Pals works with students with mental issues. She said she doesn't think he should be allowed to work with kids ever again. The teacher, who's licensed as an intervention specialist for K-12 students, was charged with 1 count of assault and 1 count of safe school assault. He pleaded not guilty and is on paid leave pending the outcome of the case. The school district declined WTVG's request for comment, citing the ongoing nature of the case. As a working single mother of 5, Graciana said she's incapable of homeschooling her kids, but that she's uncomfortable with sending them to public school at this point. She's now at an impasse while she looks into her legal options and weighs the potential schooling choices for her children. 11. Brandy Taylor. In December 2017, a special education teacher from Albertville, Missouri, named Brandy Taylor was put on administrative leave amid allegations of assault against a student. According to the complaint, the 38-year-old hit and punched a student. She was also accused of biting him in the face and beating him with a belt. In the report, a police officer noted seeing welts on the victim's leg and back, bruising on his thighs, and marks and redness on his face and around his eyes. It wasn't Taylor's first time being accused of violence. In 2016, she was arrested on domestic violence charges for allegedly pepper spraying her husband at the time. According to police, Taylor maced her partner in the eyes at an amusement park during an argument about their child. Taylor's domestic violence case was still unresolved when she was convicted of third-degree assault for the school-related incident. She was sentenced to 30 days in jail. 10. Tiffany Langford. In a disturbing video that took the internet by storm in November 2019, a substitute teacher could be seen punching a student, throwing her to the ground, and stomping on her at Lemon High School in Kyle, Texas. The teacher, who was identified by law enforcement as 32-year-old Tiffany Langford, was promptly fired and charged with felony aggravated assault by a public servant. School spokesperson Tim Savoy told the New York Times that the attack happened during a Spanish class towards the end of the school day, and that several students left the classroom to alert staff members to the situation. Savoy was unsure what led to the altercation, but he confirmed that Langford had filled in for the district's teachers 18 times over a roughly 3-month period. The student was checked out at a hospital and sent home. She remained under ongoing medical care in the months following the incident. She reportedly suffered from a brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, and clinical depression. In early 2020, her lawyer told local station KVUE that the team will require specialized care for the foreseeable future. Shortly after the assault, the student spoke with the news outlet. She said that Langford attacked her after they exchanged words. The substitute teacher had been accused of targeting a different student just 2 months earlier, prompting the district to change its policies. In a statement, a spokesperson said that the district would now require a centralized registry of complaints against substitute teachers, regardless of severity. According to records, the case against Langford is set to go to trial in July 2023. 9. Chris Hardy. A teacher at an upscale private school in Sydney, Australia, is facing allegations of simple assault after he allegedly attacked the son of a former National Rugby League star in May of 2023. According to police, who investigated after receiving a complaint from the student's father, 64-year-old Chris Hardy allegedly yanked on the boy's uniform while he drank from the water fountain. The teacher is also accused of holding the teen against the wall while telling him that the fountain is only meant for filling water bottles. Footage of the incident was widely circulated among students and parents, including the victim's father, who told Daily Mail Australia that he felt the school handled the matter poorly. He claimed that his emails to the school went unanswered and that he didn't receive timely updates on the progress of the situation. The disgruntled dad said that the whole misunderstanding could have been solved with a handshake, but that his son was still waiting for an apology. A school spokesperson declined to comment amid the ongoing case. 8. Damen Smith. While celebrating the end of the wrestling season in 2023, a group of wrestlers from Western High School in Shively, Kentucky, took some light-hearted digs at each other and staff members, including their coach, Damen Smith. But the educator, who also works as a history teacher, apparently didn't take too kindly to the jokes. He now stands accused of assaulting a student. The alleged victim, Aniston Curry, told local ABC affiliate WHAS-11 that Smith slammed him against a table, cussed and yelled in his face, and slapped him repeatedly to the ground while holding onto his collar. The teen said he initially thought the coach was joking, but was soon begging and pleading for someone to help him. Smith was reassigned to a non-classroom position while he faces a misdemeanor assault charge following an investigation. Curry said that he doesn't think the teacher should be allowed to work with kids since part of their job is to ensure children's safety. It's a valid point, but like any person who finds themselves in the throes of the American justice system, Smith remains innocent until proven guilty. In the meantime, Curry finished out his school year online and has made plans to switch to another school come fall. 7. Shirley Thompson. A special education teacher from Port Huron, Michigan, was so appalled by her own behavior against a student that she ended up apologizing in court. The case began in December 2015 when 59-year-old Shirley Thompson was charged with 2 counts of assault and battery for an incident that happened 2 months earlier. According to reports obtained by the Times-Herald, bus drivers, assistants, and other staff members described the teacher of 36 years as being old school and having a no-nonsense approach to how she handled students. In September 2015, the school district contacted the St. Clair County Sheriff's Department and asked them to investigate allegations of abuse in Thompson's classroom. The request came a year after a previous investigation found insufficient evidence to charge Thompson with any crimes. 2 paraprofessionals told investigators about incidents that they believe showed inappropriate verbal and physical conduct towards students. According to a police report, Thompson allegedly used her feet to move or restrain students, pulled a student out of the bathroom before he was finished getting dressed, punished another student by splashing water in her face, and stepped on uncooperative students' fingers. The paraprofessionals also expressed concern over some unexplained welts and markings they observed on students' arms and heads, and district bus drivers reported seeing Thompson dragging a student across the schoolyard when they refused to get off the ground. Using this information, the sheriff's office obtained a warrant to install cameras in Thompson's classroom. Law enforcement claimed to observe several instances of physical interactions with students, including stepping on one student's hand, stepping on another student's leg or foot, stepping on yet another pupil's fingers and kneeing him in the head, and more. In one alleged instance, the elderly teacher was seen pushing a student onto a rug and then stepping on his leg or knee, causing him to scream out in pain. Another report noted video evidence of Thompson pulling a student into her classroom, dropping him and kicking him twice in the head and neck area. Thompson initially denied kicking the child, adamantly claiming that her foot never left the ground during the incident. She ultimately pleaded guilty to 2 counts of assault and battery and was sentenced to 93 days in jail, with 73 days suspended. At her sentencing, she said she was shocked by her behavior in the video she watched of herself dropping and kicking a student. She said she lost her patience and let her frustrations get the best of her, and that she should have never allowed herself to reach that point. Thompson also acknowledged that parents' outrage toward her was justified, and she asked for forgiveness, insisting that she's not the type of person depicted in the media. Unfortunately for Thompson, the evidence was caught on camera, and while she couldn't undo her actions, it seemed like a stretch to blame the media for causing her to be seen in a negative light. 6. Mary Katherine Long. In early March 2023, a teacher in York, South Carolina was accused of committing third-degree assault and battery against a student at her workplace. According to a police report, 2 students were play-slapping each other while their class lined up. Their teacher, Mary Katherine Long, asked them to stop, but they didn't listen. Long allegedly slapped one of the students across the cheek with the back of her hand and asked, "How would you like it if someone slapped you?" At least one student claimed to have witnessed the incident. After turning herself into authorities, Long was released on her own recognizance pending the outcome of her criminal case. She was initially placed on administrative leave from her job and was no longer employed with the school district within days of the alleged altercation. Some news reports claim that she was fired, while others declined to speculate on whether or not she left the job voluntarily. 5. Dennis Cooper. A Union County, South Carolina high school teacher's attempts to break up a party during the summer of 2022 led to allegations of assault against a recent graduate. According to a police report, the 18-year-old victim told a responding sheriff's deputy that 54-year-old Dennis Cooper had hit him in the face for no reason. Cooper and a neighbor were reportedly trying to disperse the disruptive gathering when the altercation occurred. The incident report stated that the neighbor told law enforcement that the victim was verbally aggressive and bumped into Cooper. He confirmed that Cooper struck the teen. The responding deputy noted that the neighbor seemed intoxicated during their conversation. He also wrote that he saw no marks on the victim, but he included a photo in the report. Authorities charged the teacher with third-degree assault and battery, and he was put on administrative leave pending the outcome of the case. The current status of the case is unclear. 4. Gabriel Hernandez. In April 2023, a special needs teacher in Horry County, South Carolina, was accused of taking discipline too far during a student's behavioral episode. According to a police report, Gabriel Hernandez put the student in an inappropriate hold and dragged him across the classroom by his arms. He then allegedly pinned the student to the ground for 30 seconds while putting all his weight on the young man's legs. An arrest warrant states that Hernandez aggressively picked the victim up off the floor and slammed him down in his chair. A witness reportedly told police that a teacher's aide tried to intervene by yelling at Hernandez to stop and to let go of the student. After learning about the incident from police, the student's parents chose to press charges. Hernandez was placed on administrative leave and arrested on a misdemeanor charge of cruelty to children. He resigned from his job a few days later. News reports revealed that according to the teacher's personnel file, this was the second time he was put on leave for his alleged treatment toward a student. The first incident happened in November 2022 amid allegations of unprofessional conduct. Hernandez was allowed to return to work after 18 days, but was strictly cautioned in a letter about how his alleged conduct could jeopardize his employment and would not be tolerated moving forward. Nicole Perez, the mother of the child involved in the first incident, told the Sun News that Hernandez had allegedly stepped on her autistic son's hand on purpose. She said that the experience left her son traumatized and that the family planned to move out of state because they feared for the boy's safety. Sadly, Hernandez is the third teacher from the district to be accused of abusing students during the 2022-23 school year. His criminal case is ongoing. 3. Joshua Kahn. A disagreement over a computer tablet led to a physical confrontation and ended with assault charges against a New York City school teacher in Brooklyn's Park Slope neighborhood. According to a criminal complaint, a teenage girl was trying to get a tablet when 59-year-old Joshua Kahn became irate and shoved her 6 to 8 times, causing her to fall and hit her back against a bookshelf. The report further states that Kahn helped the girl stand up and then shoved her out of the classroom. Police said that the student suffered from bruises and back pain resulting from the altercation. Kahn was charged with assault, endangering the welfare of a child, and harassment. He pleaded not guilty and is due back in court in August of 2023, and the school district has reassigned him to a non-teaching role pending the outcome of the case. The nature of the argument that led to the incident remains unclear. 2. Patricia Graham. A 71-year-old high school teacher in Lenoir County, North Carolina, was accused of assault in March 2023 after video surfaced of her striking a student with what appears to be an extension cord. In the footage, a woman later identified as Patricia Graham could be seen hitting the student at least twice as he held his arm out in a defensive fashion. The teacher then ordered the teen to sit down. Following an investigation, law enforcement announced its intentions to charge Graham with simple assault. Sheriff Jackie Rogers described the video as deeply disturbing and commended her staff members for taking proper action. A student of the school named Eli Day told local station WITN that he heard Graham struck another student for sleeping during class. He said that opinions on whether or not the teacher should be fired were divided among the student body, with some calling for her to lose her job while others saying that the student deserved it. Graham worked for the district for 37 years before retiring in 2013. She returned the following year part-time, but resigned from her position following the assault allegations. As some of the cases on today's list show, there's a difference between being old school and crossing the line with discipline. 1. Michael Hinski. In a disturbing video that surfaced in news reports in early 2022, a high school social studies teacher could be seen chasing after and hitting a student in the hallway of a high school in Elkhart, Indiana. 61-year-old Michael Hinski was accused of grabbing the student by the backpack, pointing a finger in his face, and then hitting him, causing his head to hit a wall. The footage showed the student holding his head with one hand as the teacher grabbed his arm and began pulling him down the hallway, causing him to fall on the floor. At that point, another staff member emerged and Hinski walked away. Afterward, the student complained of throbbing head pain. Hinski was a 40-year veteran of the school district and had been named Teacher of the Year in 2020. The allegations against him came just months before his planned retirement. He was charged with misdemeanor battery and granted early retirement while his case worked its way through the court system. By granting Hinski early retirement rather than firing him, the district enabled him to collect his pension. The decision ignited deeply divided debates within the community over whether he deserved the leniency. A few months after the arrest, Hinski took a deal and pleaded guilty to the charge in exchange for 1 year of probation. He was also required to ask for permission to leave the county and to complete an anger management evaluation and any required follow-up. Hinski's defense attorney, Kyla Cristofano, said that her client was deeply remorseful for his actions and described the incident as very out of character. But as prosecutors pointed out, his behavior was unacceptable under any and all circumstances, and the court agreed.
Number 9. Racist Rampage. It's unclear if the young woman knew she was being recorded when she approached her substitute teacher and lashed out in a bizarre rage. The incident happened at Castleberry High School in Fort Worth, Texas one day in 2021. In the video, which appeared on TikTok shortly after the incident, the student could be seen hitting a button to end a call on a landline phone the woman was using. The teacher removed the student's hand from the phone, at which point the youth slapped the substitute's arm and tried to call her mom using the device. During the conversation with her mother, the student called the educator an array of inappropriate names. She also made racist comments, including that the teacher was black and peeing her off, and threatened to F the substitute up. The teen ultimately ended up chucking the phone at the teacher and storming out of the classroom. Before the school could even issue an explanation about the video, it went viral, garnering more than 130,000 views within a matter of days. In a statement, the school district reassured the public that the footage had been turned over to authorities for an investigation and that the student was suspended for 3 days and possibly facing more disciplinary measures. The district also commended the teacher for handling the situation in a calm and composed fashion. Speaking with local station WFAA, the girl's mother, Brittany Evans, said that she was unsure where her daughter learned the language that she used during the confrontation. Evans said that she did not use or allow racist language in her household, and she echoed the school's praise for the way the teacher handled the situation. She even said she wanted to contact the substitute personally, but didn't know how to reach her. But the incident raised an important issue that Evans had been struggling to deal with for a long time. She said her daughter is autistic and suffers from bipolar disorder, depression, and anxiety. The concerned mother thought her daughter belonged in special education classes and that she had met with district officials more than 10 times to try getting the teen switched out of regular lessons. Evans believed that if the school relocated the young woman to a more appropriate environment, these types of events could be prevented. Number 8. Brendan Depper. In a horrifying act of violence that was captured on camera, a male student at Matanzas High School in Palm Coast, Florida, beat a teacher's aide unconscious in early 2023. The video appeared to show 57-year-old Joan Nadich looking back at her attacker in a school hallway and frantically trying to run away as the young man charged at her. During the confrontation, the student flung the much smaller staff member onto the floor, where she landed face down and fell unconscious. He proceeded to stomp on and punch Nadich as many as 15 times as she lay motionless and defenseless on the ground. The assault finally ended when bystanders intervened. Standing at 6.5 feet tall and weighing 270 pounds, the accused attacker, Brendan Depper, is bigger and stronger than most people. It took several people to pull him off Nadich, and he appeared to act combative in the footage as staff members fought to subdue him. Nadich was rushed to the hospital with 2 broken ribs and multiple bruises. In the meantime, authorities charged Depper with felony aggravated battery against a school employee. If convicted, he could face up to 30 years in prison. Since his arrest, he has remained behind bars in Duval County on a $1 million bond. According to police, Depper attached Nadich because she confiscated his Nintendo Switch. Nadich adamantly denied the allegation, claiming that she asked Depper why he had a video game out in class and told him to put it away. He initially complied, but began playing the game again 20 minutes later. Nadich once again told him to put it away, but this time he reportedly responded with explosive anger. The irritated student allegedly began hurling insults at the teacher's aide, calling her names and even spitting at her, prompting her to head to the principal's office to report his behavior. Just moments after she left the classroom, she was attacked. Media reports described Depper as a special needs student who lived in a group home prior to his arrest. He had a history of behavioral and mental health issues, but was found competent to stand trial after undergoing a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation. Depper remains in custody as he awaits the next steps in the case. Number 7. Larana Jackson. Usually when a social media challenge goes wrong, it happens in the form of the person completing the challenge accidentally hurting themselves. But these reckless dares also often put other people in harm's way, and sometimes it's deliberate. A 64-year-old wheelchair-bound teacher reportedly fell victim to a trending challenge in October 2021 when she was attacked at a high school in Covington, Louisiana. Footage of the disturbing encounter showed a woman later identified as 18-year-old Larana Jackson assaulting the teacher and throwing her to the floor right after the school's dismissal bell rang. In an impact statement that she would later read in court, the victim accused Jackson of punching her in the face, causing her glasses to fall off her face and onto the floor. The student then allegedly grabbed the back of the teacher's head, pushed her out of her wheelchair, and punched her repeatedly as she screamed for help. The victim was rushed to the hospital, where she spent several days receiving treatment for her injuries. She suffered from a concussion, trauma to the head and neck, a fractured rib, a sprained wrist, and was one step away from a detached retina, according to an eye specialist who treated her. A student at the high school where the beating occurred told detectives that Jackson carried out the appalling crime as part of a TikTok challenge called Slap Your Teacher. However, District Attorney Warren Montgomery admitted in court that investigators were unable to determine with certainty if this was the case. Jackson was arrested on suspicion of felony battery of a school teacher. During a court hearing in St. Tammany Parish 2 months after the incident, she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. The case dragged on for nearly 10 more months before she took a deal and pleaded guilty to 1 count each of second-degree battery and cruelty to the infirmed. In her impact statement, the teacher described the long-term suffering she experienced, in addition to her immediate injuries, including mental and emotional trauma, memory loss, hair loss, ringing in her ears, and flashing vision. The judge sentenced Jackson to 2 5-year terms with all but 1 year suspended, which meant that she would spend a year in prison followed by 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to attend anger management and mental health counseling following her release from prison, and received a lifetime ban on contacting or going anywhere near the victim. Number 6. Troubled teen takes anger out on teacher. The school day was almost over for language arts teacher Kimberly Burns Fisher when she was attacked by an out-of-control student in April 2018. It all started when Burns Fisher learned that there would be no substitute to replace her absent co-teacher, who helped her instruct her final class of the day to a group of students in Pender County, North Carolina. At least 10 of the 30 pupils had special needs. They were placed in the mainstream class as part of an inclusion program, and according to school policy, the number of special education students in the class required the presence of a specially trained teacher. Burns Fisher had no special education or behavior management training, but nobody was there to help her teach. Left with no other choice, she instructed the class on her own. When she ended a vocabulary review game toward the end of the class, a student became angry because he wanted to continue playing. Listed only as TB in court documents, he called Burns Fisher a moron, and she responded by calmly telling him that he was acting inappropriately. The teacher asked the student to bring his agenda to her desk so she could write a note to his parent or guardian about the incident. As the young man approached, he allegedly lifted his backpack over his head and swung it full force into the left side of Burns Fisher's face. According to court documents, the shocked educator radioed for a crisis response team and tried to stand up, but the student charged at her and knocked her back into her chair. He ripped her walkie-talkie from her hand and charged at her again, this time knocking her into a table and filing cabinet. Burns Fisher accused the teen of kicking her in the head and back, leaving her with serious long-term injuries that put her out of work. Authorities arrested the young man, and the teacher also pursued justice in a series of civil lawsuits. She argued that TB had an extensive history of violence against school staff members and fellow students, including 14 prior incidents consisting of kicking, biting, slapping, headbutting, and other forms of assault. In one alleged attack, the student was accused of pulling a teacher's hair and trying to stab her with a pencil. Another time, a school administrator claimed that TB grabbed him by the necktie, pulled him around, and punched him in the face. According to one of Burns Fisher's lawsuits, multiple teachers had implored the school principal to remove the student from mainstream classes during a meeting several months before she was attacked. All but one of the teachers at the meeting had reportedly been assaulted by TB, and the one teacher managed to avoid an attack only because he escaped from the young man. Burns Fisher also claimed that she had been harassed by the student before and that she had asked the principal to transfer him out of her class. But the request fell on deaf ears, and the teacher was left feeling like the principal failed to take steps that could have prevented the assault. Her lawsuit against the principal was ultimately dismissed, and the teen's criminal case was handled quietly in court. Number 5. Murad Dervish. 46-year-old Murad Dervish was expelled from his graduate degree program at the University of Arizona in 2022 for threatening behavior. A few months later, he allegedly walked onto the campus and fatally shot the head of the program, Dr. Thomas Meixner, in broad daylight. The gunman fired several bullets into the victim before fleeing the scene in a vehicle. Police arrested Dervish later that day on suspicion of first-degree murder and aggravated assault. School officials had taken measures to keep Dervish off the property in the months leading up to the shooting as his behavior grew increasingly concerning. They tried bringing criminal charges against the disgruntled former scholar who was accused of threatening Meixner and others, but there wasn't enough evidence. One staff member became so worried for their safety that they began working from home to avoid crossing paths with the ousted student. Dervish was banned from the campus in early 2022 while officials began taking steps to expel him. They changed the codes to any rooms that Dervish previously had access to and circulated a flyer among staff containing his picture and instructions on what to do if he showed up. On 2 occasions, university police officers visited Dervish's home to discuss threats he was accused of making. After unsuccessfully appealing his expulsion, the decision was upheld and Dervish was permanently banned from the property in June of 2022. Between then and Meixner's murder in October, staff began forwarding emails from Dervish to the police. But there simply wasn't enough to criminally charge him until after he allegedly shot Meixner. According to search warrant documents, police found 2 handguns, several rounds of ammunition, 5 knives and 2 machetes in Dervish's vehicle after the shooting. They also seized 3 cell phones, several outfits, anti-tracking technology and eviction documents, which showed that he was being kicked out of his apartment for not paying the rent. About a week after Meixner's murder, the suspect's father, Dolgan Dervish, told the news outlet Arizona's Family that his son had displayed a long-standing pattern of disturbing behavior. He said he did what he could to try helping Murad and apologized to the victim's family through tears. According to Dolgan, Murad suffers from profound mental health issues that had landed him in and out of prison throughout his adult life. He described his son as a ticking time bomb who was prone to violent outbursts. Dolgan said that when he received a phone call from law enforcement about the shooting, his first thought was that Murad had finally killed someone. By then, the concerned father had tried convincing authorities that his son was in urgent need of mental help and that as a free person he was a danger to society. The elder Dervish cut ties with Murad after he allegedly tried to kill his mother. In the week leading up to Meixner's murder, the young Dervish reportedly tried calling his father several times to express his frustrations over being expelled. In addition to his problems at the University of Arizona, Murad had previously been accused of stalking a female teaching assistant at San Diego State University. He allegedly continued to contact the woman even after she told him to leave her alone and got an order of protection against him. Murad Dervish is being held without bond at the Pima County Jail pending the outcome of his case. Number 4. Student snaps over cell phone. When British literature teacher Tawana Turner tried confiscating a young woman's phone at a high school in Rockdale County, Georgia in January 2023, the student snapped and lost all self-control. Disturbing footage showed the young woman slamming the classroom door, taking the teacher to the floor and repeatedly punching Turner in a frenzied rage. She continued swinging even as bystanders pulled her off the victim. Turner sustained a broken leg and other serious injuries that have required ongoing rehabilitation. As of late April 2023, she was still out of work, unable to drive and relying on crutches to get around. In an interview with Fox 5 Atlanta, Turner said that cell phones are becoming a major problem among students who often go berserk when a staff member tries to take their device away. After 27 years of teaching, the exasperated educator said that if she had to start teaching with the current generation of students, she wouldn't be able to do it. At the same time, Turner said she missed her students and that she hoped to return to teaching soon. The video clip of the attack went viral, prompting an outpouring of support for Turner. She was grateful for the overwhelming amount of encouragement and prayers she received from countless strangers, which helped her get through the painful aftermath of the assault. The young woman who attacked Turner pleaded guilty to one felony count of aggravated battery against a teacher. She was sentenced to a year behind bars, followed by 3 years of probation. Turner told Fox 5 Atlanta that she believes in discipline. She hopes the teen gets whatever help she needs and learns from the experience. She also called for the increased availability of resources for troubled youth. Number 3. Tennessee teen pepper sprays teacher. As a teacher who has worked at high schools across the United States, Caleb Bates has dealt with his fair share of unruly students. He told local station WSMV that he's even had students spit on him, cut his hair, and swing at him. But an incident that occurred one afternoon in May 2023 topped them all when a defiant teen went to extremes to make it clear that she had no plans to follow the rules. While teaching an English class at Antioch High School in Nashville, Bates instructed his students to put their cell phones away. One young woman refused, so he took her phone away. With no apparent plans to back down to her teacher, the student pepper-sprayed Bates. In a viral video that first appeared on Reddit, the girl could be seen following Bates into the hallway as she continued trying to get her phone back from him. She demanded her phone and pepper-sprayed her teacher a second time, causing him to yell out in pain and fall to his knees. The teen continued ordering Bates to return her phone as a staff member who overheard the commotion exited his classroom and attempted to intervene. According to the Redditor who posted the footage, the student had been texting and Googling answers to her schoolwork when Bates took the phone away. She allegedly pepper-sprayed the teacher 3 times before she finally stopped. Bates told WSMV that he tried getting a school administrator to step in after the first time the young woman sprayed him. But the school was understaffed and the administrators on duty were covering for absent teachers, so he was mostly left to handle the situation on his own. At a time when school systems across America are plagued by understaffing and a lack of funding, Bates didn't blame his fellow staff members for the attack. In fact, it was the students Bates took issue with. As he watched the viral video, he noticed that none of the students in it seemed concerned. It wasn't the first time a student attacked Bates. Just 2 months earlier, he caught another student using their phone to cheat on a test. He took the device away and the teen allegedly punched him in the face. Being assaulted once at Antioch was stressful enough, but the pepper spraying incident left Bates feeling so uncomfortable in his work environment that he decided he was done teaching at the school. He agreed to finish out the year remotely, but that he wasn't returning come fall. School officials disciplined the pepper-spraying suspect, while local authorities charged her for misdemeanor assault. According to the most recent updates on the case, an investigation was ongoing. Number 2. Florida teacher meets students' fists. Violence against teachers has increased in the United States in recent years amid a nationwide staffing shortage. The problem has gotten so bad in some places that teachers' aides and other staff members are absent from classrooms despite policy requiring their presence. This is exactly what happened to a teacher in Osceola County, Florida, named Daniel Morris in early 2023. One of Morris's students was a 19-year-old man who was attending Toho-Pecalaga High School as part of the Florida Transition Program, which helps students with certain setbacks transition to adult life. In this particular young man's case, he was allowed to remain in high school until age 22. Morris would later tell local station WFTV that the teen's behavior became increasingly violent over a 2-year period. Teachers reportedly asked the school for more support and help working with the student, but severe understaffing meant that the requests landed on the back burner. According to the needs outlined in the teen's learning plan, he needed an aide in the classroom with him. Morris asked the school to provide the teacher's aide as promised, but the student hadn't had one all year due to the ongoing staffing shortage, which left 50 paraprofessional positions at the school unfilled. During the lesson on January 18th, Morris told the young man to stop socializing. The teacher remembered being attacked out of nowhere as the student allegedly pushed him to the ground, punched him multiple times in the head and face, and then jumped on top of his body. At one point during the attack, Morris began to worry that he wouldn't make it home alive to see his wife and kids. Harrowing footage showed the victim lying on the ground as his attacker repeatedly punched and kicked him. He suffered a concussion along with lingering headaches and nausea, and he had to take time off work to mentally process what had happened. Morris returned to a new position at a different school a month after the attack. Speaking with WESH, Morris blamed understaffing first and foremost for the rise in violent crimes against teachers. He also said that he thinks students with known violent histories need to be separated from regular classrooms and that the staff members who work with those teens need better training. Upon returning to work, he planned to work with officials to implement new measures for both student and staff safety. Number 1. Substitute quits over safety concerns. When students fail to flourish in a traditional classroom setting in North Carolina's Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, they're often sent to an alternative school called Turning Point Academy. The goal is to provide a structured environment that helps students change their behavior and get on a better path. But the school has come under criticism in recent years for violent fights and other incidents that have led to safety concerns among the staff. Working at Turning Point got old very quickly for 57-year-old Renata Horton, who began substitute teaching there in December 2022 and decided 3 months later that she would not be returning. Horton reached her limit when 2 female students attacked her for simply telling them to take off their hoodies, which are banned at the school. She later told local station WSOC-TV that the confrontation occurred in the presence of a behavior modification technician, or BMT, who is specially trained in managing students' behavior. According to Horton, instead of helping her navigate the conversation, the BMT got in her face and made a comment alluding to how one of the students she was trying to discipline wore a hoodie all the time. Out of nowhere, one of the teens rushed at Horton while the other pulled her to the floor from behind. The young women allegedly proceeded to beat and choke the substitute teacher as she fought to escape the struggle. When she looked around, she noticed that the BMT was nowhere to be found. Horton said that a third female student eventually entered the room and made a comment about how the victim could probably find her hair on the floor since she had just gotten beat up by students. At that point, the substitute decided it was time to leave Turning Point. She later claimed that her daughter took her for medical treatment for injuries to her head, neck, and hand after nobody at the school offered to help in any way. Police responded to a 911 call about the alleged attack, but released few details besides clarifying that no weapons were found at the scene. In addition to feeling hurt because she was always good to the students she oversaw, Horton told WSOC-TV that she was concerned about the violence at Turning Point escalating. She even went as far as saying that the school should be shut down before someone ends up sneaking a gun in. Horton also called for better support for troubled teens and better training for the employees who oversee the student population.
13. Anton Lazaro and Gisela Castro Medina. After connecting on a sugar daddy dating website in May of 2020, 32-year-old Anton Lazaro and 19-year-old college Gisela Castro Medina conspired to traffic female victims for commercial acts of intimacy. Lazaro paid Medina upwards of $50,000 over a 7-month period to recruit targets who matched his taste in appearances. At the time, Lazaro was a well-connected donor and political strategist for the Minnesota Republican Party. He was also known for flaunting his lavish lifestyle on social media, where he posted photos of himself on exotic vacations, private planes, and hobnobbing with high-ranking politicians. Lazaro allegedly used his money and powerful position to coerce his victims into silence, including by having them sign non-disclosure agreements. But he still caught the attention of authorities, and his days of living the high life are over for now. In 2021, the FBI raided his apartment. To prevent Medina from talking, Lazaro continued giving her thousands of dollars and paying her rent and college tuition. He was nevertheless arrested on multiple federal human trafficking-related counts. During his trial, Lazaro admitted to having relations with the victims, but denied recruiting them. He claimed that the case against him was politically motivated, but the jury apparently disagreed and found him guilty on 7 counts. Lazaro faces a 10-year mandatory minimum, but prosecutors are calling for a 30-year sentence, followed by 10 years of post-release supervision. He'll be sentenced in August of 2023. Medina pleaded guilty to her role in the operation and is also awaiting sentencing. 12. Jeffrey Pine. 51-year-old Ruth Pine was bludgeoned and stabbed to death inside the garage of her Highland Township, Michigan home on May 27, 2011. And the person responsible for her demise was none other than 21-year-old Jeffrey Pine, her own son. Jeffrey was a former star athlete and high school valedictorian who was pursuing a biology degree at the University of Michigan. His arrest for first-degree murder came as a shock to the community, who held the young man in high regard. And many people initially refused to believe that Jeffrey was capable of killing his own mother. According to prosecutors, the young man was propelled by pent-up rage over Ruth's mental health issues. Over the years, he'd suffered at the hands of his mother's abuse, And in 2010, the year before Ruth's murder, she even spent time in jail for assaulting Jeffrey. She managed to avoid charges though, by accepting treatment and promising to stay on her medication following her release. During the trial, Jeffrey's ex-girlfriend testified that Ruth Pine was dangerous when she was off her meds and that she often assaulted her son. Ruth's sister, on the other hand, argued that the victim wasn't the monster the court made her out to be. Regardless of Ruth's mental state, Jeffrey's defense attorneys denied any responsibility whatsoever on their client's behalf, arguing that Ruth was killed by strangers and that her son had nothing to do with it. There was no physical evidence linking Jeffrey to the murder, and the case was largely circumstantial. But despite this, the jury voted to convict Jeffrey Pine of the lesser charge of second-degree murder. It came as a shock to those who supported the young man's innocence, including his father Bernie, who'd stood by his son throughout the entirety of the case. And after unsuccessfully appealing his conviction, Jeffrey is now serving a 20 to 60-year sentence with an earliest possible release date of 2031. 11. William Shrubsole. Almost every teenager on the planet grows annoyed with their parents at some point for being overly protective. But one young man from Niagara Falls, New York, named William Chandler Shrubsole took his frustrations to the extreme in 1988 when he beat his mother to death on the morning of his high school graduation. Shrubsole had always been an excellent student, so it was no surprise when he was named valedictorian of his senior class at LaSalle High School. He planned to major in pre-law at the University of Chicago later that year, but his inability to control his temper would soon change the entire course of his future. During the pre-dawn hours of what was supposed to be his graduation day, Shrubsole got into a heated disagreement with his 56-year-old mother Marianne after returning home from his girlfriend's house. William's girlfriend lived just 2 blocks away, but Marianne was upset about how late her son had stayed out. She called the girlfriend's home and demanded that William return. And when the teen arrived home, he was greeted by his mother, who was waiting for him in the driveway. But instead of going to bed and dealing with the disagreement after resting and cooling off, William and Marianne argued. And when Marianne threatened to call his girlfriend's parents and picked up the phone, William tried to stop her. The fight became physically violent, and at some point the young man could no longer contain his rage. Just 12 hours before he was scheduled to give his valedictorian speech, William bludgeoned Marianne to death with a baseball bat. He never made it to his graduation ceremony because he was already in custody on suspicion of murder. The ceremony continued as planned, but Shrubsole wasn't there to give his valedictorian speech. There was also no mention of what had happened or why he was absent. Of course, people knew about the unspeakable tragedy, but they didn't want to think about it. Meanwhile, William told detectives that his mother had hit him first during their final argument. His defense attorney, Paul Cleary, said that while William and Marianne's surface looked good on the surface, it was a different story behind closed doors. Paul Cleary even claimed that Marianne had a history of beating her son and that she constantly pressured William to do better and more, even after he became the top-ranking student at his school. Friends and classmates were in disbelief over the horrific crime. In addition to being highly intelligent, William was handsome and well-liked, and overnight he went from having a promising future to facing prison time. Speaking with the Associated Press, several of William's acquaintances described him as extremely nice and mild-mannered. Nobody had ever seen him get angry, and it was impossible for anyone to imagine him losing his temper, let alone killing his own mother. But Shrubsole was perfectly capable of murder, according to a court-appointed psychiatrist who diagnosed him as a psychopath and a compulsive liar with no hope for a cure. Shrubsole was initially charged with second-degree murder, but he ultimately pleaded guilty to manslaughter as part of a plea deal. He convinced the court to grant him youthful offender status and only ended up serving 16 months behind bars. Over a 3-year period starting in 1995, he brutally assaulted multiple women. And while on trial for one of these crimes in 1996, Shrubsole faked his own death and fled to Canada, where he continued committing horrifyingly violent crimes. American investigators suspected that he was alive and had gone on the run, but they couldn't find him. He lived under various aliases in Halifax, Nova Scotia, until authorities discovered his real identity and that he was the man responsible for terrorizing an unknown number of local women. Then, in 2000, a Canadian court sentenced Shrubsole to life in prison for his crimes. He was paroled in 2018 on the condition that he would return to the United States. And he's currently serving a 9 to 15-year sentence in New York State for crimes he committed before he fled to Canada. The state parole board denied his bid for freedom in 2022, and the next parole hearing is scheduled for 2024. With any luck, he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars. 10. Mundo Mayhill. In what the media described as a honey trap murder, a 19-year-old straight-A medical student named Mundo Mayhill lured 21-year-old Gagandip Singh to her apartment in Brighton, England in early 2011. Singh was brutally beaten by two men and was then set on fire in the trunk of Mayhill's car. Her remains were found in the burned-out Mercedes-Benz 60 miles from the murder scene in southeast London. Authorities charged Mayhill and her two accomplices, Harinder Singh Shoka and Darren Peters, in connection with the crime. Mayhill and Gagandip were once close friends. But that changed when Gagandip allegedly tried to assault Mayhill while spending the night at her apartment during the summer of 2010. Prosecutors accused Mayhill of having Gagandip killed as revenge for the incident. For a long time, Mayhill admitted to luring the victim over to her home under false pretenses, and that she initially failed to tell the police the full truth. She even acknowledged that Gagandip would most likely still be alive if she hadn't gone over to her apartment that night. But she insisted that she didn't know about any plan to kill or even hurt the woman. The jury acquitted Mayhill of murder, but convicted her of great bodily harm. So, instead of focusing on her next academic achievement and the aid work she hoped to do as part of her medical training, she was headed to prison. Mayhill was sentenced to 6 years and was released in 2016 after serving 4 years. Harinder Singh Shoka was convicted of murder and sentenced to life with a minimum of 22 years, while Darren Peters received a 12-year prison sentence for manslaughter. Following her release, Mayhill married up-and-coming politician Varinder Singh Bowler, who became the mayor-elect for London's Redbridge Borough in 2019. Singh Bowler's victory was controversial due to his wife's criminal background and the particularly heinous nature of Gagandip Singh's murder. At first, he publicly defended Mayhill, arguing that she was a great example of a success story coming out of Britain's criminal justice system. Singh Bowler said that he and Mayhill had consciously chosen to keep their side of the story to themselves, and he praised his wife's charity work and other accomplishments from both before and after her legal troubles. Gagandip Singh's family accused Mayhill of trying to sneak out from underneath her actions and weasel her way into polite society after receiving what they considered to be a slap on the wrist from the court. And although Singh Bowler initially seemed determined to serve as mayor, despite any public backlash he received, he ultimately withdrew from the position before he was even slated to take over the role from the previous leader. In a statement, he said he didn't want to bring undue harm to the distinguished position by allowing it to be steeped in controversy. He emphasized his continued support for his wife and his desire to shield his family from public speculation and hearsay. 9. Jack Snider. While driving home from his girlfriend's birthday party in the middle of the night in February 2023, a high school senior named Jack Snider saw two teens walking along the streets of Battle Creek, Michigan in the freezing cold. Knowing that the wind, snow, rain, and frigid temperatures could legitimately endanger their lives, he pulled over and offered them a ride. It wasn't unlike Snider to help someone in need. He was an honors student at a local high school who was known for his intelligence, kindness, and his moral compass, which pushed him in the direction of doing what he believed was the right thing. Unfortunately, he was unaware that the passengers he picked up had plans to repay his generosity with a horrifying act of violence. At some point during the ride, the suspects attempted to carjack Snider, and they fired 2 bullets into him before fleeing the scene as officers responded to reports of gunshots. Police arrived to find Snider lying motionless on the ground next to his vehicle, and unfortunately, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities caught up with the two suspects after receiving an influx of tips from community members, along with surveillance footage that enabled them to track the perpetrator's movements after the shooting. One suspect faces charges of felony murder, carjacking, and 2 gun counts. According to police, he admitted to stealing his mother's 9mm handgun and firing the fatal shots. He told detectives that the other suspect was chatting on social media with someone he'd stolen cars for in the past. The suspect allegedly said he decided to pull the trigger when it appeared as though Snider was reaching for a gun or something to defend himself with. The other suspect was hit with 1 count each of open murder and carjacking, but at the moment, both cases are ongoing. 8. Marin Katherine Wesley. In June 2014, police in Westland, Oregon, published photos of a large amount of drugs and cash that were seized during a recent traffic stop. The contraband consisted of 1.5 pounds of psilocybin mushrooms, commonly known as magic mushrooms, as well as 67 methamphetamine and ecstasy pills. Additionally, $1,600 in alleged drug trafficking proceeds was recovered from the vehicle. Behind the wheel was a young woman named Marin Katherine Wesley. Some of the drugs that were seized during the traffic stop were found in the 18-year-old's purse. Wesley and a man who was in the car with her, Gordon Philemukadi, were arrested in connection with the drugs. Up until that point, Wesley was a model citizen and a straight-A student, according to her mother, who told Oregon Live that her daughter had graduated early. In high school, she took advanced music classes and calculus, and she had a large amount of volunteer community service under her belt. During one of Wesley's court hearings, her mother told the judge that the young woman had gotten into drug treatment, attended school in New York, and had landed herself a job since her arrest. Wesley took a deal and pleaded guilty to 1 felony count of attempted delivery of meth in exchange for getting several other felony charges dropped. And in the end, she was sentenced to 3 years of probation. The judge appointed to her case even commended her for doing all the right things to get her life back on track. According to Wesley's mother, Marin met George Cady after leaving her family home and moving to the Portland area on her own. But trouble soon followed. Cady, who was considerably older than Wesley, opted to go to trial. Unfortunately, though, the outcome of his case is unclear. 7. Joel Ortis. After graduating as the valedictorian of his high school in 2016, Joel Ortis went on to study information technology at the University of Massachusetts. Known for his impressive tech skills, he was already a seasoned programmer by the time he entered college. During high school, Ortis was extremely interested in robotics, and he enjoyed passing on his knowledge to other students. His ambitions took a less respectable turn at university, though, when he began stealing cryptocurrency. Using a method called SIM swapping, he stole his victims' identities and convinced their cell phone providers to assign their numbers to him. From there, he took over their social media and financial accounts. In some cases, he even managed to obtain identity documents in his victims' names. Ortis also sometimes impersonated his victims for the sake of trying to get people to send him money. Investigators reportedly identified at least 40 victims, and it's possible that there were even more that they didn't know about. Around half of them lived in California, and Ortis allegedly targeted wealthy tech entrepreneurs and cryptocurrency executives. After discovering in 2018 that he was planning to travel out of the country, authorities made their move and arrested him. According to an affidavit, Ortis admitted to spending around $150,000 in Las Vegas in the weeks leading up to his arrest. Police seized $250,000 in stolen cryptocurrency, although the actual amount he stole was somewhere between $5 and $7.5 million. Ortis was originally charged with 41 crimes, and in early 2019, he pleaded no contest to 8 counts of identity theft and several computer crimes. As a result, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. In a historic first that would set the precedent for future cases, Ortis was the first defendant to ever be convicted of a SIM swapping scheme at a time when the practice was growing in popularity. A handful of other alleged SIM swappers were facing charges for large-scale identity and cryptocurrency theft at the time of his conviction. But authorities hope the outcome of Ortis' case will influence future rulings. 6. Haley Dakeman. As a straight-A student, 18-year-old Haley Dakeman had a lot of options for her future. And as her high school graduation approached in 2021, she made plans to attend the University of New Orleans in the fall. But her life took a tragic turn just days before she was sent to walk across the stage, when she and a friend were found unresponsive and rushed to the hospital. They'd each taken half of what they believed was a Percocet pill, but it was actually fentanyl, and while the friend survived, Haley died from the effects of the overdose after spending 4 days in the hospital fighting for her life. Haley didn't have a major history of risky or rebellious behavior. In fact, she was well liked among her peers and teachers, and she typically stayed out of trouble. The teen's untimely death served as a sobering reminder that just one bad decision can cost someone their life. In the days following Haley's death, Jefferson Parish Coroner Gary Sitanovich said that he hoped the tragedy would be a wake-up call to young people about the dangers of counterfeit pills. Speaking with Fox 8 Live, he said that while a pill may look like a Percocet or some other pharmaceutical, it may actually be fentanyl. In addition to being a dangerous narcotic in the first place, more often than not, fentanyl products are manufactured illegally. They're not made under strict laws or standards like legitimate prescription pills, and contain inconsistent doses of the drug. Even coming from the same batch, one fentanyl pill might kill someone, while another has a much milder effect. In other words, taking these drugs is essentially like playing Russian roulette with one's life. At a time when America's opioid epidemic was plaguing rural communities, Black Mines Parish Sheriff Gerald A. Turlidge Jr. vowed to go after criminals who were bringing deadly drugs into the community. Authorities eventually charged the man who sold Haley and her friend the fentanyl pill, 22-year-old Franklin Senfles, with second-degree murder. And in the end, he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. 1. Lorenzo Elliott. In the state of Louisiana, prosecutors have considerable power when it comes to the decision of whether or not to charge teens as adults for certain felonies. So, when Lorenzo Elliott was accused of being the getaway driver for 2 of his cousins following a robbery in New Orleans in December 2015, it didn't matter that he was a straight-A student and a member of the school band with a near-perfect attendance rate. In a Christian Science Monitor report on Elliott's run-in with the law, journalist Katie Reckdahl wrote that the ordeal started when the young man failed to show up for school one morning, prompting a social worker to call his house. And that's when Elliott's family told the worker that police had arrested him for his alleged role as the getaway driver for his cousins. He was charged as an adult, which threatened to severely damage his future and to send him to prison rather than college. Felisa Maria Rhodes, the social worker who called Elliott's house searching for him that morning, it wasn't unusual to learn that an absentee student had been arrested. In fact, she'd dealt with it many times. And more often than not, a student's family couldn't afford bail, landing them behind bars for months or years to come as they faced their case in court. But after seeing a number of kids with promising futures get lost to the system and never return to the classroom, Rhodes and other staff members weren't about to let it happen again. They threw their support behind Elliott full force and advocated fiercely for him in court. The morning after Elliott's arrest, Rhodes hand-delivered a letter about his accomplishments and character to the judge overseeing the case. At the time, the young man's school didn't have any resources for supporting kids who became entangled in the legal system, especially those who landed in adult court. But Rhodes vowed to devote whatever time and energy she could to helping students in these positions, starting with Elliott's case. Lorenzo Elliott would later tell the Christian Science Monitor that he grew up in public housing and found himself running with a bad crowd. He said that his own family told him he was either supposed to end up dead or in jail. And while Rhodes' letter failed to sway the judge, who imposed a high bail that Elliott's family couldn't afford, her advocacy gave Elliott hope that he could still have a bright future one day. Rhodes continued to fight for Elliott's release as the prosecutor weighed whether or not to pursue the case. To her, it didn't matter whether or not he was guilty. She knew that teenagers with developing minds are prone to making mistakes, and it doesn't mean they'll continue along that path as adults. Elliot might have made a terrible decision, but his academic accomplishments showed that he wanted a better life than the one he grew up with. The prosecutor decided to pursue the charges, which could have landed the young man behind bars for 15 years. But after finally reading Rhodes's letter, the judge reduced Elliot's bail, and the community came together and raised the necessary funds to secure his freedom. He immediately went back to playing in the school band and scrambled to catch up with the nearly 2 months' worth of lessons that he'd missed. The case dragged on until 2 years after Elliot's graduation, at which point he took a plea deal that spared him from prison time and came with 3 years of probation. His dedication to school played a major role in the judge's decision to be lenient. But Elliot gave a lot of the credit for his freedom to Rhodes, who tirelessly advocated for him to receive a second chance. And since then, Rhodes has worked with other students in need, including newly arrived immigrants who've become straight-A students while fighting to legalize their residency in the US. 4. Grace Smith. The mask mandates that came along with the COVID-19 pandemic caused a lot of mixed feelings in the United States, and the issue became so divisive that in some cases, police got involved. Many people felt strongly that wearing a mask helped to reduce the virus's spread, and that people had a civic duty, not to mention a legal obligation to comply with mask mandates. Others, however, believed that mask mandates violated constitutional freedoms and that they weren't effective at stopping the spread of the coronavirus in any way. These clashing views made their way into American high schools, where some students got in trouble and even made news headlines for refusing to wear a mask. Included among them was Grace Smith, a straight-A junior from Laramie, Wyoming, who stubbornly stood by her anti-mask beliefs to the point where she got arrested in the fall of 2021. Smith had no prior run-ins with the law when she refused to wear a mask, and her refusal to leave school grounds after being told to put on a mask or leave earned her multiple suspensions. She also racked up $1,000 in trespassing fines for refusing to obey the rules of the mandate. The young woman reportedly cooperated when she was first suspended, but she failed to comply with the next 2. She told the Laramie Boomerang that she left as instructed after her first encounter with administrators. But after consulting a lawyer with her family, Grace took a more strong-willed stance. During the second incident, she refused to leave and accepted the $500 fine that came along with the decision. She reacted the same way the third time she was ordered to leave. But instead of quietly ticketing and fining her, the police came to the school and arrested her. As the school sat on lockdown for an hour and a half, Grace engaged in a showdown with school officials and was eventually handcuffed and hauled off to the police station. Her father, Andy, recorded the perp walk as he trailed behind the officers who were taking his daughter into custody. Other cell phone footage shows police trying to reason with Grace, but getting nowhere during the showdown that took place before her arrest. During her interview with the Laramie Boomerang, the teen emphasized the importance of protecting rights that she believed were God-given. She said that she believed people should be able to choose whether or not to wear a mask. Altogether, Grace spent 10 days suspended and faced the possibility of being expelled over her refusal to comply with the mask policy. Shortly after news broke of her arrest, Grace officially withdrew from her high school. And during a school board meeting, she accused authorities of unlawfully arresting her. She also chastised school officials for allegedly trying to own kids and make their health decisions for them. While it's unclear what Grace did next in terms of her education, she and 11 other plaintiffs who shared her anti-mask mandate views came together and filed a federal lawsuit against 5 school districts and the Wyoming Department of Health. The lawsuit accused state officials of committing fraud by extending Wyoming's COVID-19 public health emergency longer than necessary in order to obtain federal funding. And in addition to requesting a jury trial, the plaintiffs sought an injunction on mask, social distancing, COVID-19 testing, and quarantining requirements. However, the case fell apart as the plaintiffs repeatedly failed to respond to multiple motions filed on behalf of the defendants to dismiss the suit. In the meantime, 3 of the 11 original plaintiffs left the lawsuit, including Grace and her father. The judge ultimately dismissed the suit without prejudice, which means that the plaintiffs can file another lawsuit over the same complaints if they choose to do so in the future. 3. Mountain View High School stabbing. Located north of Provo, the city of Orem, Utah has a population that's 88% Mormon. And while it doesn't rank among America's safest communities, violence is rare in Orem, and the crime rate is below average. So it was surprising, to say the least, when a student at Mountain View High School stabbed 5 of his classmates one morning in November of 2016. The young man was previously homeschooled and had started attending Mountain View 3 months before the incident. He was a straight-A student with no behavioral issues, and there were no indications that he was being bullied when the disturbing incident happened in a school locker room one morning before gym class. Using a knife with a 3-inch blade, the teen stabbed each victim at least once, striking them in their necks and torsos before turning the weapon on himself. Staff members risked their lives to protect the school students by cornering the stabber until responding officers arrived. Police tasered the young man and took him into custody. Witnesses described a terrifying scene as students fled from the locker room covered in blood. Sophomore Paxton Ransom later told the press that he noticed blood on the locker room floor and thought it was fake until he saw one of the victims laying on the floor. The school went on lockdown for about an hour before police concluded that it was safe to resume the day. 2 victims were rushed to the hospital in critical condition, while 2 others were listed in fair condition. The 4 teens were hospitalized, while the 5th victim was treated and released. Thankfully, all 5 of the students survived their injuries. But hundreds of concerned parents showed up at the school in search of their children. Some kids returned to class, while others went home for the day, unable to focus on anything after what had happened. Even now, in June of 2023, the circumstances surrounding the stabber's decision to commit the crime aren't entirely clear. According to police, the young man said he wanted to know what it felt like to kill before he inflicted similar harm on himself. Shortly after the incident, his parents wrote a heartfelt apology letter that the police released to the public. In the handwritten note, they offered their condolences to the victims and their families, and they acknowledged outright that the victims hadn't done anything to provoke their son. The parents emphasized that the act wasn't racially or ethnically motivated and said they were at a loss to explain how deeply sorry they were for what happened. After being deemed mentally competent to stand trial, the suspect pleaded guilty to 5 counts of attempted aggravated murder. The judge deferred to the maximum sentencing guidelines to keep him locked up for as long as possible, which in his case would be at least until the age of 21. Afterward, he'll have to serve a certain amount of community service as part of his requirement to repay the victims for his actions. 2. Student suspended over inappropriate shirt. A straight-A student named Summer was finishing out her senior year at Hickory Ridge High School in North Carolina in 2017 when she unexpectedly got suspended over a dress code violation. The offensive piece of clothing was a long-sleeved, loose-fitting olive green shirt that didn't show her midsection or anything else that would typically be considered inappropriate. But it was an off-the-shoulder top which showed Summer's collarbone and the tops of her shoulders. And while it didn't seem like a big deal, it was apparently against the rules. The shirt also exposed her lower back when she sat down, which also violated school policy. The school's principal approached the teen during lunch and asked her to put a jacket to cover up her shoulders. Summer didn't see the problem with what she was wearing, so she said to the principal twice, "My shirt is fine." She finally relented when a friend gave her a jacket to wear, but that wasn't the end of the ordeal. Speaking with local station WCNC, Summer said that after she put the jacket on over the shirt and zipped it up, the principal told her she had to go to another room to change. She didn't understand why the situation was continuing after she did what was asked of her to remedy the problem. Summer had a 4.4 GPA and was looking forward to choosing from the list of universities that would most likely be available to her, considering her top-notch grades. But this wasn't her first run-in with the school's principal over the years. In fact, so many incidents happened that Summer's mother contacted the school and told them that they had to reach out to her before taking disciplinary action against her daughter. The principal hadn't contacted the young woman's mother on the day of the shirt incident, so when she was asked to go to a separate room to change, she adamantly refused. Summer later told WCNC that she said to the principal, "I'm sorry, but I can't go anywhere with you unless my mum is on the phone." When officials were unable to reach the young woman's mother, she continued with her day as usual. But while sitting in the auditorium with her friends and other students, the principal entered and sent everyone away except for Summer. Afterwards, she accused the principal of threatening to have her arrested by the school resource officer. According to Summer's version of events, the resource officer stood just feet away with his hand on his gun while the principal issued an ultimatum: go change her shirt or be arrested. While many people would likely relent at this point and follow the principal's orders, Summer felt strongly that she was being unfairly targeted for discipline. She continued trying to reach her mum, who called back right in the nick of time and advised her daughter to follow the principal's orders. After finally going to the control room and changing, she was suspended for 10 days for insubordination. More specifically, the complaint noted that Summer denied that her shirt was a problem and that she didn't do as she was told. In addition to the suspension, she was prohibited from attending her graduation and other end-of-the-year senior activities. And while the nature of Summer's history of problems with school officials was never fully disclosed, she found it wildly unfair that she worked so hard for 4 years to walk across the stage, only to be banned from doing so. She claimed that the school was allowing drug dealers and other criminals to participate in the ceremony, yet she was excluded for wearing a supposedly offensive shirt, despite being an honor roll student. Summer's mother appealed the school's decision while the teen became increasingly worried that the suspension would affect her choice of colleges. She told WCNC that she was on track to study pre-med and that having a full ride at university was key to her future. But unfortunately, it's unclear whether Summer ended up walking across the stage at graduation and if the suspension hindered her college options. 1. Darnell Hamilton. Before he became an accused criminal, high school senior Darnell Hamilton was an honor student at a Chicago prep school with a 4.0 GPA. He also had hopes of landing a scholarship at Ohio State University after graduation. But his plans for the future were interrupted in September 2013 when he was arrested for allegedly bringing a gun to school. Prosecutors initially claimed that the gun was filled with live rounds, but the school later released a statement saying that the weapon wasn't loaded. Hamilton reportedly told police that he got the gun from a friend and that he had it for protection against gangs who'd been harassing and threatening him for 2 years. And his mother, LaDonna Petty, told a similar story to the press. Speaking with Block Club Chicago, she said that her son typically encountered problems during his ride to school on public transportation. And while Hamilton's school was well known for the high college acceptance rate among its students, they were still forced to deal with the reality of what goes on the streets. According to Petty, gangs hassle young people, which puts pressure on them to act like they're not scared in order to avoid being targeted in the future. The concerned mother had gone out of her way to protect Darnell from violence and crime, and at one point, they even packed up and moved to the smaller city of Des Plaines, where the crime rate is lower. But the loss of her job had forced them back to Chicago, where the problems unfortunately continued. When her son was arrested, he quickly admitted that he'd made a mistake, but she understood why, and she continued to support him through his legal troubles. School spokesperson Evan Lewis acknowledged that the area surrounding the school had its challenges, but said that the school itself was well secured. He also said that Hamilton had no previous disciplinary issues. And while there's no excuse for breaking the law, Hamilton's story is a sad one, which tells the tale of a young man who didn't know what else to do in a situation where he felt like he needed to protect himself. The outcome of the case is unclear, but hopefully he managed to square away his legal troubles and continue on to college. Would you rather have a history of being a straight-A student while also having a criminal conviction on your record, or have an unblemished criminal record and a history of being a mediocre student? Let us know in the comments below, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.